What is Dr. Anthony Fauci really trying to hide? I mean, this is a fair question. We ought to know. We ought to know by now what exactly the Wuhan Institute of Virology was doing, what role they may have played in the creation of this coronavirus. I mean, we couldn't even talk about it forever, right? It was a conspiracy theory to even suggest or ask the question. Maybe it came from the lab. But here we are a year and a half later. We have no idea. Despite news that, guess what, our own National Institute of Health was sending checks to the lab in Wuhan for gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses. Oh, but don't tell Anthony Fauci that. No. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Trish Regan Show. I am Trish, and this is pretty unbelievable stuff. I mean, it has been a while now. We ought to be able to figure this out. We lost a lot of time because there were some people that wanted to say, perhaps for political reasons, that it was a conspiracy theory to think that this came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There may have been some other factors involved as well. Maybe people didn't want us to know that the NIH, our National Institute of Health, was actually giving money to this particular lab. Well, interestingly, you are not going to believe how defensive Dr. Anthony Fauci was when he was pushed on a whole series of questions by Senator Rand Paul. There was this big back and forth between the two of them in the hearing yesterday, and bottom line, Fauci totally freaked out because Senator Rand Paul was saying, wait a second, you were lying when you told us that the NIH had never given a penny to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, when in fact, documents show it did. Fauci said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And Paul said, well, I'm making a criminal referral for you because it's a crime to lie under oath. Oh, there's so much more here that I got to tell you about. I mean, we knew how bad this particular lab was. This was all public knowledge, and yet we were giving money anyway. We have a lot to get to, but quickly here first, a word from one of our wonderful sponsors. You know I love to barbecue in the summer. I'm sure you do too, right? I am extremely particular, however, about what I eat and where it comes from. So I want to tell you about GoodRanchers.com. The quality of the food from GoodRanchers.com is tremendous, absolutely superb. It's all from the USA. I highly recommend these products. It's wonderful meat. I myself get the family plan, which is great because it comes right to your door. You get the subscription, so it shows up every month. And you can put it right in the freezer. Everything is individually wrapped so you don't waste anything. I like that. And believe me, you're going to love the prices. With GoodRanchers.com, you can be assured that all the meat delivered to your doorstep is 100% grass-fed from America. So do your part. Do your part to eat well while helping to support American farmers. Go to GoodRanchers.com/Trish. You can use the code word Trish for a special deal I have for listeners and viewers of this podcast. Again, that's GoodRanchers.com/Trish. The subscription is really the way to go. Anyway, back to all of this. Listen, it's important to know where your meat's coming from these days, right? Given what we saw in the Wuhan wet markets. Anyway, the reality is this was not something that we can just dismiss as coming immediately from the Wuhan wet market. It's something that actually could have been created in a lab, and this is something that needs to be explored. But there were a lot of people that wanted to shut this down, including Anthony Fauci. For over a year, he was out there pretending there was no chance in HELL that this ever could have come from anywhere other than the wet market, except that the lab in Wuhan, where it might have come from, we now know, was a lab that he was helping through the NIH to fund. So this is pretty unnerving, right? Some previously undisclosed U.S. intelligence came about where we learned that 3 employees at the Wuhan Institute of Virology fell so ill with symptoms that they were hospitalized. Symptoms, by the way, that were consistent with COVID. And this was all going on during November of 2019. So now China has repeatedly denied access to the WHO, to the health records. So the WHO, by the way, not able to stand up for itself for whatever reason, is like, oh yeah, no way that this came from the lab. Must have been from the wet market. By the way, there's been other theories like, oh, it must have come from Europe. So instead of gaining information and doing the proper research, the WHO, like Fauci, gave China a pass. And they echoed the same line that you keep hearing from the left, from the mainstream media, or at least you did for so long, This whole thing came from a wet market, end of story. I'm sorry. To me, there's no end of story, right? To me, you're going to dig and dig and dig for the truth. And it's really upsetting when they shut you down for doing that. Look, I have a lot of great sources. I had and do have good sources on this story. And they were telling me back in February of 2020 that they didn't necessarily think this had been deliberately created, but they did think that it came from the lab in Wuhan, where the Wuhan virus originated, right? Like, that's not a stretch, by the way, to think that that might have been the case. But why was Fauci going along for the ride with China and the WHO? I mean, don't forget what he told National Geographic, right? That big splashy article that came out last year, somehow conveniently right around the time, just a day after, actually, Donald Trump had said that he had seen intelligence that suggested the virus originated out of the Wuhan lab. Everybody went nuts then, right? That's when the whole conspiracy theory started. He was just saying this because he's trying to save his political hide. Well, National Geographic ran this big article that quoted Fauci saying all the science showed that the virus had come from the wet market. Only, it turns out, it may not have. I have some fascinating data I want to get to with you that I want to share, because this is pretty wild. I mean, if you go back and you look at the money that was being transferred, I think you're going to raise a few eyebrows, right? We were giving the Wuhan lab via a group called EcoHealth money, $600,000 for gain-of-function research into bat coronaviruses. So why didn't this come out earlier? Why didn't Fauci say to someone? Why didn't anybody come forward and at least tell us that our U.S. taxpayer dollars were going to this lab in China to help this very, very aggressive, dangerous research? I mean, I think we know why, right? It's a CYA move, because the minute that comes out, whoa, the public's going to go crazy. What do you mean? Like, we helped in some way, shape, or form, even inadvertently? Like, maybe we thought the money was just going to the secretaries over there and not to the actual research? I don't know. You can make up any story you want. The fact is, not so much as one penny should have been going to such dangerous research, especially in light of the fact that we should have known. I mean, look, you don't trust anything out of China, right? Let's be realistic, right? Pet food, even. Nobody wants to buy their pet food from China. Toys from China. I mean, everything's got a bad reputation because they don't have the same quality controls. So why on earth are we trusting China when they don't have the same quality controls with super aggressive, dangerous research that could cause a worldwide pandemic like this? I mean, this is one where we need some accountability. We need to hold people responsible. Whoever allowed this was willing to basically just shove it all under the rug, right? This is the tragedy. It was wrong. It was wrong to be giving money to this organization, to this lab, and we should have known. We should have known. Our government should have known better. Our NIH should have known better. Fauci should have known better. The dangers were all part of publicly available information. This is what I want to share with you. So I went back and I looked at a video, actually just recently released by a Taiwanese news channel. It was quite evident that these safety violations in the Wuhan lab were, known. It was out there. In fact, Taiwan News, they went back and they took this clip from a CCP news story. And the CCP, the Communist Party, their television station aired a report on December 29th, 2017. This is 2 years before the entire COVID-19 outbreak, keep in mind. A report about this particular lab showing that they clearly lacked safety procedures. Now, they weren't deliberately showing that. The whole thing was supposed to be a puff piece. In this case, the Chinese media were trying to showcase this courageous woman, this Batwoman, and her wonderful team of scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology to show how they were on this mission to discover the origin of SARS. And the point of the story was, my goodness, they're risking their lives. Look at how dangerous this is. And they showed the scientists on the video without the proper protective gear. And you saw one scientist, if you watch the video, holding a bat with bare hands, and you could see the other scientist collecting possible infectious bat feces, wearing short sleeves, shorts, no protective gear. No protective gear at all. I mean, why bother with that? This is just a bunch of courageous scientists that the Chinese media is totally loving here. One scientist actually talked about how a bat's fangs actually went right through his glove, and he described it as, quote, like being jabbed with a needle. So look, here's what we know. It was publicly available knowledge that this was a risky lab. The Taiwanese news, they went back and found the report. Why didn't we find that report before we gave them some money? I ask, right? What was our government doing giving our taxpayer dollars to the Wuhan Institute of Virology so that it could continue their research into bat coronaviruses while our own government simultaneously knew this was dodgy stuff, right? Why would we do that? Why would we give this money to these scientists? We never should have. And this is the problem. And no one is willing to admit that it happened. So I would just ask, why not own up to it? Why would Anthony Fauci hide this information all along? Why wouldn't he have come out and said, look, we may have really messed up. It turns out we were helping to support this lab. We thought this lab was a good place. Turns out they were doing some stuff they shouldn't have. Look, it was just purely an accident. Again, sources of mine have said, going back to February 2019, it was an accident. So that's all quite possible. But again, we deserve the truth, right? Every American deserves to know what happened. And if we screwed up by giving this money to them, then we screwed up, okay? But come forward and admit that. This is not a time for CYA. These are fair questions to be asking. And again, I applaud Senator Rand Paul for asking such questions. It's amazing. It's amazing how frustrated and angry Dr. Fauci became. Again, you can see the clip at trishintel.com. But his entire career, his entire legacy is resting on this. And I would just say it's time to stop being a bureaucrat. Own up to what's what, because Americans deserve truth. Just a reminder, make sure you go to trishintel.com, download the podcast there, get my newsletter, sign up for it. Make sure you follow me on social media, including on Rumble, as well as YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. I really look forward to talking with you some more as we discover what really happened here. I will be back with all the new developments on this again, over and over again. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.